So my birth mother, 2 months into her pregnancy with me in South Korea, she had a D&C abortion. Type of abortion where the doctor goes in the mother's womb and rips the baby apart and brings them out in pieces. And they thought it was successful. They thought everything had gone according to plan, how it was supposed to. And they sent her home. And a few months later, she realized that she's actually still pregnant with me. And so at that point, I was kept, and then I was born later on that year, placed with a foster home family, lived with them for 13 months before I was adopted into the Presley family.
Well, welcome, Josiah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
I know it's quite a long way you've come. Where have you come from?
All the way from Oklahoma in the United States, so just north of Texas. Nobody seems to know where Oklahoma is, but north of Texas, the big one.
Texas, yeah, we're familiar with that, so brilliant. Well, again, thank you for travelling so far. This is absolutely awesome to have you here and to meet you in person. I know I've watched your testimonies and read your story, but actually to meet you, I feel really privileged. So
well, I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be here.
So I think maybe we'll look at where your story actually starts, and like any good pro-life story, your story starts in the womb.
Yeah.
But that's not in America, was it? Because you were conceived and born in South Korea?
Yeah, so I was born in Seoul, South Korea. I lived with a foster family for about a year before I was adopted and brought over to the States. And so then I grew up my entire life in the state of Oklahoma.
Brilliant, okay. And you said that you were adopted by an American family.
Yeah.
Is that quite common that American families will adopt children from South Korea?
So there's definitely a decent amount of adoption in the States. My parents, my dad, he's a pastor at a church, and so it was their Christian values that really led my parents to adopt. I'm actually one of 12 kids, and 10 of us are adopted. Wow. And so they've adopted from kind of all over the States, but also a couple of us are adopted from South Korea, and then a couple adopted from Haiti, an island just right there off the coast of Florida, really. So,
you must be so proud of your parents.
Yeah, they're really good people. So.
Oh, I would love it if we could have brought them in the studio as well.
Yeah.
So 12 of you in the family?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So 5 boys and 7 girls.
Do you know what inspired your parents to want to adopt so many children? I mean, that's certainly from an English perspective, it's unusual to hear of quite such a large adoptive family, though maybe more common in the States.
Uncommon in the States still, definitely large by families' size in the States. Like I said, a big part of it were their Christian values. So a lot of that was they wanted to have as many kids as God wanted them to have. But also, my parents, when they got married, they had 2 sons. And then my mom had multiple miscarriages, actually. Oh. And so through those miscarriages, they were already looking towards adoption. And so my mom was actually serving at a pregnancy center, a crisis pregnancy center in the town they were living in, and it was through her serving there, a young woman came in adamant she had to have an abortion. And my mom was there counseling her, and then the woman ended up asking my mom if she would adopt the baby. And that is when my parents were confronted with the reality of, okay, do we really believe what we say we believe? And they adopted that child, who's my older sister. And then that started them on the journey to adopting. And so as they then followed that, some were pursued, they were looking to adopt, others were more or less kids being dropped in their laps, asking if they would take them in, and so they did.
Gosh, praise God for the heart of your parents. What real Christian people, in every sense of the word. Yeah. That's beautiful. So growing up then, Josiah, did you know you were adopted? Was that always something that you were aware of?
And so obviously I'm of Asian descent and my parents are Caucasian, so there's never a question whether or not I was adopted in that sense. But being a large adopted family, my parents, they were also very open with all of us about our adoption stories, what they knew about adoption, and they always, framed them in good terms, positive terms of adoption, and speaking about our birth parents in those ways. And so, all throughout my childhood, I knew about my adoption story, at least to a degree. So.
And so did you always know what the situation with your biological mother? Was that something that you were familiar with, you know, the story of before your birth? And
Yeah. So that part of my story, my parents chose to hold back. So they were going through the adoption process with me when they actually found out that my birth mom had had an abortion. And
so can you explain what happened then?
Josiah? So my birth mother, 2 months into her pregnancy with me in South Korea, she had a D&C abortion. Type of abortion where the doctor goes in the mother's womb and rips the baby apart and brings them out in pieces. And they thought it was successful. They thought everything had gone according to plan, how it was supposed to. And they sent her home. And a few months later, she realized that she's actually still pregnant with me. And so at that point, I was kept, and then I was born later on that year, placed with a foster home family, lived with them for 13 months before I was adopted into the Presley family. And so that portion of my story, my birth mother's choice to have an abortion, my parents, they found that out while they were in the process of adopting me. And that was a piece they decided to hold back of my adoption story until I was a little older. They told me when I was 13 years old. So when I was 13, they thought I was old enough to process that, understand what was happening, and know that part of my story. And so that's when they shared that part of my story with me.
And so the surgical abortion, the attempted surgical abortion, this physically affected you, didn't it? And was this something that you weren't aware of then until you were 13? Were you not aware that it was the attempted surgical abortion which had physically affected your left arm?
For most of my childhood, from 13, I had struggled with the fact that I had the deformity. A big part of my story is, for most of my childhood, I struggled with a lot of self-image issues, self-worth, self-value issues because of my deformity. I thought I was less than other people. I thought I would not go as far in life or be able to contribute as much in life because of my deformity. And that was something that I had struggled with for years. And so at 13, when my birth parents told me that portion of my adoption story, there's a lot of anger towards my birth parents because I blamed the fact that I had that deformity on them and the choices they made. And so there's a lot of anger towards them because we also, growing up in a Christian home, we grew up in a very pro-life home. We believed that life started at conception. There was no question about that. There's no question that we believed abortion was wrong. That was a taking of innocent human life. And so there's a lot of anger towards my birth parents when I learned that part of my story, because how could they make such a wrong decision? Like, didn't they know that was wrong? Didn't they know that was an evil act to do? And so there's a lot of anger towards them. I blame the fact that I had the deformity on them. There's a lot of hurt, though, also, that I struggled with. Because even though I was angry at them, I also, at the same time, had proof in my mind that my life was worthless. Because these people who should have loved me, my own flesh and blood, my own mother, right? If anybody should have cared for me, loved me, taken care of me, protected me, it should have been my mother, right? She had made a decision like that to try to take my life. And so there's a lot of hurt also with that anger and proof in my mind that my life didn't have any value, that it was worthless. And that was something I struggled with for a number of years, for a few years really. And today it's something I can struggle with if I let myself go right back to that mindset. But a big change for me happened when I was 16 and I met Jesus and I came to salvation in Jesus. And as I started a relationship with Him, found my value and my worth in Him, He changed a lot of my mindset towards that, as far as where my value was, where my worth is. Helped me to get past that anger, to recognize what true forgiveness looks like. First, the way God's forgiven me, but also the call then to forgive others. And so that's also a big part of my story and the big turning point for me.
So do you feel then that you have got to a place of reconciliation with, I mean, I know you haven't met your birth mom, but do you feel at peace towards her now?
For sure. A big part of that really came as I became saved. So when I surrendered my life to Jesus, a big part of that was find my worth and my value, not in my deformities or the things I think I can do or will be able to, but in what Christ has done. As I found value and worth in who He is and what He has to say about me, I found security, right, in Christ and identity in Him. And as I found my identity in Him, I also was called back to the reality that as a Christian, we're called to forgive others when they've wronged us.
Yeah.
And so as I was confronted with the forgiveness that God's extended towards me in Christ, He started to work that forgiveness in my life towards them, to recognize that they're human beings who should be valued, who should be cared for, who should be forgiven. Another big piece in my journey of forgiveness was my involvement in the pro-life movement. And so I'd been kind of serving and working in different ways as much as a teenager could in the States, in Oklahoma, like a part of the different pro-life groups in my city and things like that. But as God changed my heart, as I shared my story, as I heard more stories, I was also reminded of the reality that the women and the men on the other side choosing abortion, they're also human beings who matter. And there's a reality that we say, hey, the unborn, their life matters because they're human beings created in the image of God who are valuable and should be protected. But that should be across the board for anybody.
Yeah.
Right? And as I heard stories of women who had had abortions time and time again, I heard story after story of the regret that they had, and then the pain that they went through, and the years of mourning, and the years of difficulty, and the years of just guilt that followed for so many of them as they realized what they had done. And I think God used that to soften my heart, not just towards post-abortive women, but towards my own mother, to recognize that and to see that. A couple other details. We don't have very many details for my story, but a couple other details we have are that my birth mother was living with my father out of wedlock, and they had a 2-year-old daughter already, and they made the decision out of financial difficulty, whatever that necessarily entailed, but definitely not the most ideal situation that they were in. And so I found empathy towards her, considering they're in a very difficult situation, I'm sure. And but as the Lord just used that to show me their humanness, their humanity.
Yeah, and even when you're talking about your biological mum and dad's situation, I mean, I know you've talked about people choosing abortion, but I know when I've spoken to many post-abortive women, one of the key things that they'll often say is that they felt there were so few choices open to them. And obviously I know we don't know the individual situation of your birth parents, but I know for many women and couples, nobody even presents giving birth to a child or maybe placing a child in adoption as a positive outcome. Particularly adoption. I know over here adoption can be thought of as very negatively, when actually it's an incredibly beautiful gift if you feel you're not able to. And the fact that your parents have done this and adopted so many children, I think is an incredible testimony to the beautiful fruit of adoption and both of the children and for the parents.
Yeah, no, beautiful. Adoption is such a beautiful thing, and I'm so thankful for my parents and their choosing to adopt us. I tell people all the time that to me, there's no better earthly picture of the gospel than adoption, right? That a God who owed this creation, owed these people nothing, that He would span the distance of heaven to earth, pay the cost of His very Son's life, in order that He could take these people who He owed absolutely nothing to. In fact, He owed judgment to for the ways we've rebelled against Him. But He would pay that cost to adopt them as children, to them heirs and inheritance in heaven with Him for all eternity. And then in the same way, in earthly adoption, we see these individuals who would take these kids who they owe absolutely nothing to. My parents, they owe absolutely nothing to me or my 10 other siblings who they found. That they would, in some cases, span a great distance. My parents is all the way from Oklahoma, all the way to Korea for me, right? Span that great distance, pay the great cost of what adoption is, just to adopt these children who owed nothing to them, who they owed nothing to bring them into their family and to give them an inheritance in the Presley name. Like, to me, there's no better earthly picture of the gospel than adoption. And it is a beautiful thing. I think one thing sometimes we forget, though, is it does come out of tragedy, right? It comes out of a broken situation. It comes out of a terrible situation. But it's such a beautiful thing that can come out of it.
Isn't that just the core of the Christian message?
Yeah.
You know, God time and time again
100%.
bringing beauty from ashes,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And I just want to go back to when you were just sharing about, you know, your maybe feelings of lack of self-worth and that kind of brokenness that you were feeling in your teenage years. And I think in a way it's quite an interesting parallel because, again, talking to many people who either consider abortion or have had abortion, that can often be one of the factors in considering abortion, can't it? I mean, I know often, like, you know, if a woman is thinking, I don't know, I'm going to lose my boyfriend if I have this abortion, or I'm going to lose my job or my situation or my reputation or whatever it might be. And that is the only thing sometimes that gives them their self-worth. If they haven't got any other identity other than, you know, the love my boyfriend gives me, or I am, you know, whatever their job is, and that's set to be on the line if they continue a pregnancy, then we can see how that in itself, that lack of self-worth, can actually be one of the factors that leads to abortion, can't it? So I think it's interesting in a way that this is something that you've had to overcome yourself, and recognise that real struggle in finding what your true identity is and the importance of that in life.
And I think that's a question that we all have to answer, right? Because we so often, we tie our value and we tie our worth to our circumstances, to how many people like us, to what I'm accomplishing in life, to how much money I have in the bank, to whatever it is, how many relationships are present. Like all the time, we tie our value and our worth personally to these different objects around us. And that's a big mistake for us to do, right? Because those things change, and that's not what makes us valuable or worthy. And that's really kind of at the heart of the abortion issue. That's one of the biggest problems, because most of the time when we talk about the dignity of the unborn, right, when we talk about their value, a lot of times, like when you talk arguments, and I know you know this, right? When we talk arguments, always what they talk about, right, is they won't grow up in a good situation, or they won't have both parents present, or they won't have these things present, or they won't be able to do, you know, all these different things. We create all these situations in which it makes it okay to dehumanize them. And all we've done is we've placed their value and their worth based on their situations, right? Whether it's the circumstances, whether it's the environment they're in, whatever it is, and we've missed it. And we use that to justify devaluing and taking the lives of unborn children. It's no wonder that we do that with ourselves as adults, as young people, right? We tie our value and our worth to that, and then when those things pass away, all of a sudden we're left with a human being who we don't feel like is valuable about ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's like the natural, like when you follow that logic of where we're starting with the unborn and viewing them that way, when we apply that out across the rest of humanity and we do that, we end up in the exact same place where we go, my life isn't of value. I don't have worth because these things are missing. And then we've missed the whole point. And the point is, we've got to find the point of why is a human life valuable? And from a Christian perspective, I'm going to say every time a human life is valuable because a human being is created in the image of God.
Amen.
And because that creator has said, that human being, their life is valuable. Not based on what they do, not based on how many other people like them, not based on the circumstances they're born in, but by the very fact that they exist as an image bearer of God, their life is valuable and should be protected, cared for, defended, and that's our call.
Yeah, if only we realise the message we are really extending to young people when we say to them that, it's okay to have an abortion. Yeah. It's a terrible message, really, like you've just explained and expanded on. Yeah. That extends further than that and extends to themselves that, you know, if you're not valued by other people, then you're not really valuable. Yeah. And that's the message that essentially we give our young people. Yeah. And of course, the other message that we'll sometimes get from people who support abortion, you know, the kind of mantra of my body, my choice. Yeah. And I think in a way that's something that you are very much able to speak on, really, aren't you? Because this is your body. Yeah. Is that something that you're ever able to share with other people? You know, the kind of the fact that you are the living witness of my body, and yet you had no choice. Yeah.
I mean, I think so. So when I share with folks, there's always a few different responses that I get. But if I'm talking to somebody who is pro-choice, when I have in the past, I try to avoid as much as I can bringing up the fact that I'm an abortion survivor. Because the second that comes up in the conversation, it really stops the conversation.
Really?
Right? And it's because I'm trying to dialogue with them. I'm trying to get to a point where we can say, let's think about what abortion really is, what abortion really communicates. And it always comes down to one of those points of views, right? Like either they're not a human being, so like their life doesn't matter, or the rights of the woman should trump the rights of the unborn. And whenever I'm in a conversation with a person and I bring that part up, it all of a sudden becomes very difficult because now they have a living, breathing person in front of them who they're making those same arguments to. And that's a much more difficult conversation to have. But I think it's an important one that we need to think about from that perspective. And so, but that is
absolutely
really
where are your
point.
rights, and you are the living proof of the fact that you had no choice in that situation. Bringing that up to date then, Josiah, you're now married with two lovely children. Does that make you maybe view life and the whole story of your conception and birth and adoption? Have you kind of viewed it differently since becoming a father yourself?
Yeah, so one of my greatest joys in life is getting to be a dad, and getting to have two daughters. I mean, there's nothing I want to do for those girls, and I'm super thankful that the Lord would allow me to have a wife and have children. I'm reminded, some of the greatest things I'm reminded of when I look at them, though, is I'm reminded of the reality that the fact that I'm here, that I get to be married and I get to have these two beautiful children, is because of the faithfulness of people like Randy and Kathy Presley, my parents, right? Because if it weren't for their faithfulness, I wouldn't have been adopted, I wouldn't have been brought into that family, and now here we are, decades later, and here we have two more amazing, beautiful human beings who are valuable, right? Who are of worth. And that's because of their faithfulness. And so I'm reminded of the importance of our faithfulness, right? Our small steps of faithfulness. Adoption is a big step of faithfulness, right? But like the difference that makes and how it affects generations to generations, and we need to think about that reality and think about the fact of how many people aren't with us today because of abortion. How many people aren't with us today because other people didn't rise up to take care of their neighbor? So I'm reminded of that. I'm also reminded of, in the future, this is a world that my daughters have to grow up in. And they are growing up in a world that increasingly, specifically towards girls, wants to tell them your entire value and worth is based on these different things outside of yourself. And the importance that I have as a father, the important role I have as a father to remind them consistently that their value is not in those things, but in who their creator is. But then also the duty that I have to do everything I can to help leave this world in as much better of a place as I possibly can for them. And I think that's something that we have to think about. I think that's something every generation has to think about. How is this generation leaving the world for the next generation? And so it's so important that we answer that call and we move it forward.
So as we begin to bring this to a close, Josiah, if you were talking to, I know you're in ministry yourself, if you were talking to a young person who was maybe struggling with an unplanned, unexpected pregnancy, maybe feeling they didn't have much support, and were contemplating abortion, what would you say to that person, maybe if they were listening today?
There's three things I would do. I would remind them of their value. That, hey, regardless of how you're feeling right now, regardless of what the circumstances you're in, regardless of how big of a mistake you maybe think you've made, you're no less valuable. You are a valuable human being who God cares for, who we care for. So I would remind them of their value as a human person. But I would also then remind them of the value of that unborn child they're carrying. I would remind them that that is a child, a human being who is so valuable, who's loved by God, who has worth that should be protected. And then the third thing I would remind them and I would tell them is, and we're going to do everything we can to help you. whatever that looks like. I'm blessed to live in the United States where there are many resources in those regards. I've heard a statistic that the U.S. makes up about 10% of abortions worldwide, but makes up about 90% of pro-life resources, which is staggering. And so, but just as a personal individual, the commitment to say, hey, we're going to do whatever we can do to help you. And then to know on my side, and I think sometimes people think like, oh, if I get involved, if I do something, I've got to do something big. You don't have to do something big. You care for that one life, and you've made a world of a difference. You know why? Because that one life matters.
Yes.
The millions matter, but the millions matter because the one matters. And so do something for the one. Care for them, love them, do whatever you can to help them, connect them with people who will do that. But remind them of their value, remind them of their child's value, and then commit to them. We're going to do what we need to help you get through it.
Finally then, Josiah, I mean, I know you are very much a proactive pro-lifer. You're not somebody who just has that as a label. I know that you very much connect with other people, talk about this issue, speak about this issue like you are today. What would you say again to other people who maybe struggle to do that? I mean, I know there's a lot of people who might say, yes, they are pro-life, but maybe nobody else knows about it. Particularly maybe people in church who struggle to share that message with other people. Is there anything you could say to maybe help encourage them or guide them?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big piece is learning, right? And we've got this thing called the internet, right? Like look up different groups to be a part and learn more on a topic, right? Like if anything, if you're watching this video, you can't say you don't know anymore. Right? You know to a degree, and because you know, you are responsible for what you do with what you know. And so go learn more, but then also just start to have those conversations with those around you. The number of people in your life their lives have been touched by abortion is more than you're thinking. And you need to start having those conversations. And it may just start within your family, within that small circle of friends, wherever it may be, wherever your sphere of influence is. Be willing to be known as that pro-life person. Be willing to know as a person that it's just understood, hey, if this situation arises, you're a person that can be talked to without judgment. You're a person that can be talked to who will care about them, who will love them, and who will help do what you can to help them and that child's life. But I think that's a big place that people really need to start, is they need to start with, now you know, so you need to do something with what you know. You need to learn more, grow more. You need to then start having conversations in your sphere of influence with the people right around you. And then maybe hopefully that looks like starting to become engaged and involved in other areas, whether it's activism, whether it's ministries in your church, whatever it might be, to say, okay, now how can I be an activist to move this forward?
Well, thank you so much for your incredible witness, Josiah. And I know you were just sharing about the amazing amount of pregnancy centres that there are around America. Obviously, for our English audience as well, we've got an amazing amount of help in this country. Good Counsel Network is a key one that people can find out about. And also for those who are suffering after abortion, which I know you've touched on by mentioning your own birth mother's story. Like Rachel's Vineyard do amazing work helping women or men who've been affected by abortion and helping them to become really important parts of the pro-life movement, which is so important for them to know that I think even if they've been through multiple abortions, there is a place in the pro-life movement for them. If they can find that healing and that preparation that they might need to be able to then speak out themselves. So thank you again so much for joining us, Josiah. It's an absolute delight to meet you in the flesh, and thank you so much for coming such a long way to be with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So glad to be here.
God bless.